Hey guys, tonight we slip into the candlelit corridors of ancient Constantinople. The air smells faintly of mildew and melted wax. Somewhere nearby, sandals slap against worn marble floors, and you, yes, you, trudge into the Byzantine Bureau of Weights, Measures, and other profoundly dull things. Your shift started at dawn. It's now, maybe 3 sunsets later? Hard to tell when the clocks are mostly guesses, and the calendar was designed by a monk with unresolved issues. You probably won't survive this bureaucracy, but don't worry, no one really does. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'm always curious who's falling asleep to 9th century admin drama. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open a tall, wood-panelled door and find yourself in a room that smells like old vellum and newer regret. This is the Registry of Livestock Movement Authorization, one of the Empire's more tedious offices. Walls are lined with scrolls sorted by province, then by animal. It's eerily quiet, save for the gentle scraping of styluses and the occasional wheeze of a man named Focus, who's been documenting goat licenses since Justinian's first reign, or possibly since dinosaurs. Here, time isn't measured in hours or days, it's measured in renewals, audits, and whether Theodora from accounts is still out sick. You settle into your assigned stool, slightly damp from humidity or a clerical accident, and begin copying lists of mule permits from one scroll to another. Why? Because someone dropped the originals in a canal. This is how empires rot. From the parchment up, it's the 9th century. Constantinople's still shiny from the outside, but inside the wheels of the state are gummed with red ink and grape juice. The empire has survived Goths, Persians, Bulgars, and barbarian fashion. But it may not survive paperwork. Still, you work, because you must. No one's quite sure what your department does anymore, but your superior, a man who insists on being called strategos of statistical logistics, says it's vital to the imperial grain flow. Which sounds impressive until you realise it mostly involves counting beans. Literally. Now and then, a palace official breezes through, all gold trim and no eye contact. You're invisible to them. But you see everything, especially the ink-blotted calendar nailed to the wall. Here's where things get weird. That calendar is not what you call accurate. There's no weekend for starters, just an endless stream of Labour Days, fast days, feast days, and random martyrdom anniversaries that no one agrees on. Today might be St. Macedonius's Day, or St. Macedonius the Younger, or a commemorative day for a goose that once flew into Hagia Sophia and pooped on a bishop. Historians still argue whether that was intentional. This situation has consequences. Not only are you overworked, but so is everyone else. Markets fluctuate, monks collapse mid-vigil, and bakers keep forgetting which day the sourdough is due. Rumours circulate that someone once tried to take a regular break every 7th day, and was exiled to a monastery where the break involved hand-copying sermons onto snail vellum. You stare at the calendar. The days are marked with terms like post-cross, after Antioch, and before the feast of the Annunciation of someone or other. You attempt to decode what today actually is. Is it a working day? A fasting day? A working fasting day where you pretend to eat soup that's really just warm water and repent while counting sheep? Not metaphorically, literal sheep. The marble around you is chipped from generations of bored scribes tapping their quills while contemplating escape. One of them, long ago, carved a tiny doodle of a bureaucrat being eaten by a lion. Wishful thinking, probably. Outside, the empire creaks forward. Naval fleets are being built. Walls are repaired. The emperor eats olives. But here, deep in the administrative bowels, your reality is ruled by ink pots, wax seals, and a terrifying little man named Gregory. Ah, yes, Gregory. You haven't met him yet. But you've heard the whispers. He's in the adjacent office, records of records. A man so methodical he once reorganised the imperial census by hair colour, just to see what would happen. People say he hasn't blinked since the iconoclast controversy. Others say he invented a new kind of boredom that spreads through eye contact, but more on Gregory later. For now, you scratch another date onto a fresh scroll. Your hand cramps. Your back seizes. You look up at the wall and wonder how many days until a feast day. Then you remember, feast days aren't rest days. They're just days where you get to eat walnuts before resuming calculations. A junior scribe sneezes behind you and is immediately escorted out for a 3-day quarantine. You sigh. He was your lunch partner. At dusk, bells toll. Not for you, of course. You're not allowed to leave until you've copied 10 more scrolls, which wouldn't be so bad if they didn't keep rolling up at the edges like misbehaving lasagna. By the time you're released, it's dark. The streets are wet with wine runoff and suspicious puddles. You pass a man selling boiled turnips and another selling what might be roasted owl, and you wonder, when was the last time I had a full day off? No one answers, because no one remembers, except maybe Gregory. He remembers everything. But don't worry. Things are about to get interesting. And by interesting, we mean statistically unprecedented nap patterns. You arrive the next morning, maybe it's morning, maybe it's pre-dawn, maybe it's second dusk. Time, in the Byzantine bureaucracy, is more of a suggestion than a fact. Your sandals squelch slightly with every step. The rain from last week still hasn't evaporated from the atrium floor. You step over a startled chicken and duck under a hanging scroll labelled "Inquiries awaiting imperial consideration since 841. Your destination today? A thrilling promotion. Or more accurately, a sideways move that someone above you swears is a career opportunity. You're now officially the assistant deputy notary for the Ministry of Donkey Routes. You didn't even know this was a ministry. You suspect it didn't exist until they needed somewhere to stash someone who accidentally duplicated 400 camel permits last month. You enter the office. It smells of hay, vinegar ink, and raw despair. The Ministry of Donkey Routes manages the travel documentation for all pack animals moving between provinces. That's it. No elephants, no camels, just donkeys. The reasoning is allegedly logistical. The real reason? Someone's cousin owns a donkey rental fleet and needed the Empire to validate his business model. The walls are lined with maps, none of which match each other. One labels Cappadocia as slightly soggy. Another has a drawing of a donkey in a tiny hat, inexplicably marked imperial property. You sit at your new desk, which was once a crate of pomegranates and still smells vaguely fermented. A scroll is plopped in front of you by a man whose robe is 80% wine stain. Backlog, he mutters, then wanders off to cry quietly behind a curtain labelled Strategic Planning. You unroll the scroll and immediately wish you hadn't. It's not one scroll, it's 4 glued together. You're to transcribe all donkey movements from Thrace to Galatia between the 7th and 9th centuries. There is no explanation for why. Possibly the emperor lost a bet, so you copy. You write things like, 3 donkeys departed Perinthus bearing flour, accompanied by 1 mule of suspicious origin. You try not to question what makes a mule suspicious. Now and then Gregory floats by. Yes, that Gregory. He moves silently, as if gliding, a scroll tucked under one arm like it's a sleeping child. His robe has not a single ink smear. His sandals don't squeak. He smells faintly of old basil and older secrets. He pauses beside your desk and hums disapprovingly. You're slouching in your calligraphy. C strokes should curl like an olive branch. He walks on without another word. You don't know whether to cry or apologise to your pen. Still, you keep working. The donkey manifests are written in a script so tight and cramped they look like the writer was whispering to the parchment. And then there are the abbreviations. Dozens of them. DLMP, RWTN, FHV. What do they mean? Historians still argue whether Byzantine abbreviations were standardised or just elaborate pranks. Around midday or mid-fog, you take your state-sanctioned meal break. It consists of pickled root vegetable mash and a cup of vinegar tea. The tea burns a little, possibly medicinal, possibly poison. Who knows? You eat sitting on a crate while watching a scribe try to chase down a pigeon that stole his wax tablet. The pigeon is winning. In the corner, a clerk is sobbing over a calendar reform notice. You lean in. The Empire has decided to align the religious fasting days with new lunar calculations. This means moving 30 feast days forward by 2 days, cancelling 1 martyrdom anniversary, and inventing a new saint named St. Barnabas, the chronically tardy. This causes panic. The market days now conflict with fast days. The monks are confused. The bakers are furious. And you? You realise it means you have to redate 600 donkey travel receipts. By hand. At that moment, you wonder what would happen if you just didn't. If you didn't show up one day. Would anyone notice? Probably Gregory. The next day your question is answered. You're in the scriptorium early, trying to recategorize donkey travel by hoof width. Don't ask. When a young clerk stumbles in, eyes wide. "He didn't come in today," he whispers. "Who?" "Gregory." A pause. A cold silence spreads through the room like spilt ink. Gregory never misses a day. He has a personal attendance record carved into a marble plaque in the hallway. The man once came in with a dislocated shoulder and wrote 3 ledgers using his foot. You all just sit there, unsure what to do. Then, as if summoned by your confusion, Gregory enters. He looks slightly dishevelled. His robe is wrinkled. His scroll is upside down. He mumbles something about a miscalculation in the calendar harmonization matrix. And then, get this, he sits down and does nothing for an entire hour. Absolute silence. No scratching quills, no murmuring. Even the flies pause mid-buzz. What just happened? He finally looks up and says, "I took a rest. A personal rest period. For recalibration. It was efficient, everyone stares. And you blink. A rest period. Is that even legal?" Later you hear a whisper in the archive hallway. Gregory invented a rest day, like it's a heresy, like he's rewriting the 10 Commandments to include napping. But there it is. He stopped working, on purpose. And the strange part? Nothing collapsed. The empire didn't fall. The donkey still travelled. The ink still flowed. You go home that evening, if evening is even the right word, and lie on your straw mat staring at the ceiling. Could you rest? What if you skipped a morning? What if Gregory started something? You return the next day, not because you want to, but because you're too curious not to. Gregory has caused a ripple, a bureaucratic tremor. The man who once lectured a tax scribe for using inconsistent spacing between numerals has taken an unscheduled hour off, and now no one knows what's real anymore. You creep into the ministry of donkey routes. Something's different. The atmosphere has shifted. Someone left their ink pot uncapped. A clerk is humming, off-key, as if he's forgotten where he is. There's even a faint whiff of roasted garlic. Who brought real food? You find Gregory at his desk, meticulously realigning the papyrus edges of his personal filing pile. He looks up at you with an expression somewhere between boredom and omniscience. "You're here early," he says, which is his way of saying you're late. You sit down, scroll in hand. The day's task, recopying Donkey Manifest damaged in the Great Pomegranate Incident. Don't ask. It involved a shipment of poorly sealed crates and 1 hungry messenger pigeon. As you dip your quill, Gregory clears his throat. This is alarming. Gregory clears his throat once a fiscal year. You glance up. "I've been refining a model," he says, sliding a slim scroll toward you. "For alternate pacing." You unroll it. At first glance it looks like a typical Gregory chart. Precise grids, colour-coded notches, footnotes in Greek, Latin, and a code system he invented. But then you notice, every 7th square is marked with a sigil, a sleepy-looking olive branch. Below it, in tiny letters, personal repose interval. You blink. Is this a scheduled day off? He nods, as if it were obvious. It's the only statistically viable solution to the duplicative decay pattern I observed in our copy rates. You don't want to admit it makes sense. You also don't want to admit that your right hand has begun involuntarily twitching every time you write the word Thessalonica. Still, you press him. Won't that cause issues with, well, the Empire? Only minor ones, he says, which I've accounted for. The donkey flux drops slightly, but the scribe error rate improves. It evens out a pause. Then, historians still argue whether Gregory's model was intended as rebellion or reform. And just like that, the plan begins to spread. First, it's just you. Every 7th day, you accidentally miss the morning shift. You make up an excuse. Flooded roads, wild goats, a spontaneous minor plague. Byzantine life is generous with excuses. No one questions you because the empire is too big, too slow and too tired. Then Theodora does it. She claims honey poisoning. You know it was a nap. Then Focus, who now coughs strategically every Thursday. A strange thing happens. The scroll work gets neater. The ledgers contain fewer crossouts. People seem less inclined to threaten pigeons. You think maybe Gregory's onto something, but Gregory isn't resting. Not really. He's refining. He now has what he calls a predictive scroll cycle schedule, which, if you can stay awake through the explanation, predicts optimal scribe output based on rest intervals, grain availability, and sun angle. The scroll is 22 feet long. There's a column just for seasonal ink moodiness. You wonder if he sleeps at all. Meanwhile, the Empire churns on. The Emperor is still obsessed with reorganizing the navy. The palace has issued a ban on overly decorative soup bowls. The Patriarch is in a mild feud with a sect of monks who worship by chanting exclusively in bird calls. But no one notices the growing pattern of rest days sneaking in beneath the marble crust of governance. You find yourself looking forward to them. You wake up, remember it's a repose interval, and stay in bed. Not because you're lazy, but because Gregory said it's efficient. And if Gregory believes in it, well, that's practically imperial law. One day, a mid-level inspector named Nikitas arrives, clipboard in hand, suspicion in eyes. His job? To evaluate department vitality. Translation, he's looking to trim excess heads. You all panic. Gregory, calm as ever, hands him a scroll labelled Comparative Output Statistics, Weekdays versus Optimized Schedules. Nikitas squints at the graphs. What's this? Slope. A visual representation of productive uplift in post-repose scribe flow, Gregory replies. Nikitas nods as if this is perfectly understandable, which it isn't, then quietly leaves. Later, you hear he was reassigned to aqueduct surveillance. You suspect Gregory filed a form to make that happen. Now, word spreads beyond your office. Monks from the Registry of Holy Bones start showing up late every 7th day. A baker in the imperial kitchens arranges his dough in the shape of the olive branch sigil. A parchment vendor begins marketing rest day scrolls. Blank sheets with inspirational phrases like, "Let not thy ink define thee." The idea is becoming a thing. Gregory isn't surprised. Patterns expand, he says. That's their nature. But not everyone is pleased. The strategos of statistical logistics corners you one day in the lavatorium. "I hear you've been taking liberties with your attendance," he growls, breath heavy with vinegar. "I'm following the Gregory model," you reply. He blinks, then grunts, then walks off muttering something about Emperor efficiency initiatives. You think you're safe. You are not. Yet, at home, you start keeping your own personal schedule scroll. You decorate it with little sleepy donkeys. You even buy a new pillow. Life is still full of noise and ink and vinegar tea. But there's a rhythm now. A pause. A pattern. One that began with Gregory. The man with a spreadsheet in his soul. The Emperor is itchy. No, seriously. The man can't stop fidgeting in his golden robes. Some say it's a fabric reaction. Others suspect stress from yet another rebellion in some region no one can spell. But those who really know, meaning the kitchen staff and a particularly observant cat, whisper that his imperial itchiness is due to a change in his soap supplier. Lavender oil shortage. Again. Either way, the consequences are bureaucratic. Because when emperors get itchy, they get cranky. And when they get cranky, they issue decrees. Not because they solve problems, but because writing decrees feels like doing something. And nothing terrifies a Byzantine emperor more than the idea of appearing idle, even while scratching. So now, here you are, back in the Ministry of Donkey Routes, squinting at a scroll labelled Imperial Rescript concerning improved provincial route. Efficiency and related matters. You stop at the words "and related matters." That phrase is the bureaucratic equivalent of "open can, add worms." Gregory stands beside you, arms folded, expression unreadable. He issued it at dawn, Gregory says, in bed. While being scratched by a eunuch holding a goose-feather fan, that last detail might be apocryphal, but it's Gregory, so it's probably true. You read on. The rescript is classic Byzantine. 10 sentences, 5 contradictions, and no actionable verbs. Let it be known that the movement of transport beasts shall be regularized, harmonized, and, if necessary, rotated for the glory of the Most High and the health of the Empire. Gregory leans in. He doesn't know what rotated means in this context. No one does. The result? Chaos. Every ministry interprets the decree differently. The Ministry of Animal Tithes schedules rotating oxen. The Ministry of Public Penance now makes sinners walk in spirals. And you? You're ordered to streamline provincial donkey routes with enhanced rotational clarity. You sit at your desk and stare at your scroll. Gregory slides another document across to you. It's titled Donkey Loop Model V2. This, he says, is how we fix it. Or at least make it look like we did. And there it is. Your task today is to help design the illusion of imperial obedience. You create a map that shows donkeys moving in highly efficient circular patterns across Thrace, Pontus, and Cappadocia. It makes absolutely no logistical sense, but it looks incredible in wax-sealed form. Meanwhile, Gregory begins incorporating his rest day intervals into the new loop logic. It's genius. Every 7th loop requires a recalibration stop, a pause in the route to reset the saddle fittings. No one questions it. Saddle fatigue sounds legitimate, word spreads fast. The bakeries notice that donkey deliveries are now slightly more predictable. The scroll vendors cheerfully discover fewer parchment shortages, thanks to what's now being called Gregory's logistics spiral. People start calling Gregory's system the spiral of repose. It sounds almost holy. A monk in the archive of saintly remains starts blessing rest day scrolls. A priest accidentally preaches from one during a sermon and doesn't notice until halfway through. The congregation is deeply moved, but not everyone is convinced. A certain Chancellor of Imperial Conformity, yes, that's an actual title, summons Gregory to explain the new spiral. You accompany him. More support. Less human shield. The Chancellor's office is cold, despite a roaring brazier. You suspect the fire is ornamental and powered by crushed dreams. He gestures at a massive wall chart. These loops, they suggest rest periods. Gregory nods. That's correct. The Chancellor narrows his eyes. And yet our holy calendar contains no sanctioned rest day, only feast and fast you jump in. But productivity has gone up. We've eliminated over 12% of donkey misroutings, Gregory adds, and copyist errors dropped by 21%. The Chancellor snorts. Even so, I want an audit. Full records. Week by week. If this spiral rests too long, it may unravel. You leave the meeting in silence. Back at the office, Gregory is oddly chipper. Let him audit, he says. It will keep him busy. Busy he is, for weeks. The Chancellor and his unfortunate assistants comb through scrolls, ledgers, donkey-foot traffic logs, and something called mule slip forms. Eventually their eyes glaze over. They submit a report that concludes, while irregular in form, the system demonstrates enhanced cohesion in logistical throughput. Rest intervals, though unorthodox, appear to lubricate the imperial machinery. Yes, that's exactly what they write. You highlight lubricate and giggle for the rest of the afternoon. The Emperor? He's forgotten all about it. His itch has passed. He's now fixated on reclassifying certain spices as minor heresies. And so Gregory's rest spiral survives. You begin to notice it in other departments. A coin minter in the Royal Mint sets aside one day a week to polish his beard instead of pounding metal. A herald in the Palace Hall of Names uses his rest day to write poetry about pigeons. Even the court cat seems to vanish every 7th day, returning plumper and smugger. But Gregory's rest days are anything but lazy. He begins refining the system again. He introduces symbols. The olive branch now marks total repose. A crescent moon means partial labour cessation. A curled-up donkey denotes mental recalibration interval. You try to keep up, but Gregory's already charting seasonal drift, tea availability, and even the psychological impact of candle scents. This isn't just a schedule, it's a movement. And one day, as you're finishing your 4th tea of the day, ginger mint allegedly calming, you realise something terrifying. You've stopped counting days in the traditional calendar. You now think in Gregory cycles. Looper 3, repose mark 7, scroll interval delta. And you're okay with it? The bureaucracy hasn't collapsed. The donkeys haven't revolted. The Emperor's robes remain tolerable. And somewhere, deep in the ink-stained guts of the Empire, the concept of a weekend has just been born, quietly, accidentally. But there it is. You wake up groggy, your straw mat twisted into a vague map of the Aegean Sea, and you realise something unsettling. You've begun dreaming in scheduling charts. Actual dreams, with columns and footnotes. One particularly stressful one involved a Gregorian loop colliding with a fasting calendar, resulting in a donkey uprising. You don't even own a donkey. You drag yourself to the Ministry of Donkey Routes. Today is marked with an olive branch and a curled-up donkey symbol on your personal scroll. According to Gregory's latest logic, this means mentally alert, physically minimal effort, also known as bare minimum Monday. It's catching on. But you're in for a treat, or a trap. There's a new scroll pinned to the cracked notice wall by the entrance. Imperial Standardization of Holy Days and Secular Observances, Draft 148. Draft 1 was published during Emperor Basil's reign. The fast and feast calendar is changing. Again, you groan, then sigh, then groan again for emphasis. Feast days, fast days, vigil days, quarter feasts, saints' days, obscure martyr remembrances, eclipse anniversaries, agricultural moons, and that one holiday nobody can define but everybody takes off. Byzantium doesn't lack days of note, it just lacks logic. And now, thanks to a minor war between the Monastery of the Fifth Candle and the Guild of Market Weight Inspectors, don't ask, there's a new plan. Align holy days with solar cycles to reduce market irregularity. In theory. Gregory isn't impressed. They're trying to overlay linear reform on a spiral system, he says, waving his latest scroll. You nod like you understand, he goes on. We've got 3 calendars running at once, the ecclesiastical, the fiscal, and the administrative. And none of them agree on what day it is. Historians still argue whether this was chaos by accident or design. In the corner, Theodora groans. So, what is today? Gregory consults a wooden dial he carved himself. Feast of St. Theophanes the Recliner, plus 5th fiscal rotation, plus lunar cycle B12. You all just stare at him. So you do what all great empires do in the face of impossible math. You guess. Today is probably a work day, but with light fasting, unless the moon says otherwise, or unless your bishop says otherwise, or unless the emperor changes it again, which he probably will, once he's done renaming lentils after minor saints. Gregory, of course, has a plan. He pulls out another scroll, this one marked Master Reconciliation Scheme, Feast Fast Repose Overlay version 3.6. It's colour-coded, with ribbons. The idea? Merge the religious feasts with repose intervals in a way that creates a consistent repeating structure. Like a week, but not called that. Gregory refuses to use week. He calls it the harmonised labour-repose sequence. You glance at the model. Every 8th day is a rest, every 4th has a feast, every 12th is a full abstention from paperwork, justified by a vague theological footnote. It's beautiful, you whisper, shocked. Gregory doesn't smile, but his left eyebrow twitches, a sign of deep joy. You trial it for a month. It's weird, but weird in a good way. Markets begin planning around it. Monks stop arguing over bread days. Scribes accidentally experience leisure. The system stabilizes, except in the bakeries. The bakers are furious. Apparently, aligning rest days with feast days has created a dough surge. Everyone wants loaves the night before, and no one wants anything on the day itself. The Guild of Imperial Bakers sends a formal complaint scroll. It's 40 cubits long and ends with a drawing of a screaming baguette. You meet with Gregory. We may need an offset, he murmurs. A pre-feast baking exception clause. So now, on day 7, people rest. On day 6's bakers panic. You feel a little bad. But you also enjoy sitting in the forum with actual olives and time to chew. Meanwhile, the government releases its own version of the system, heavily edited and poorly understood. They call it the Order of Restful Vigils, and declare it mandatory for all departments east of the Bosphorus. No one knows what that means. Clerks in Bithynia interpret it as every Tuesday off. Scribes in Antioch take every 6th day and call it Greg's gift. And in Galatia, the governor declares an official blank scroll day, where no writing is allowed, only interpretive gestures. You start hearing phrases like, "Oh, thank Greg, it's rest day." The phrase catches on. Now Gregory's annoyed. "I never intended it to be about me," he grumbles. But it's too late. There's a street vendor selling tiny donkey figurines labelled Sir Rests a Lot. Another sells scroll bookmarks with the olive branch emblem and the slogan "Nap like Gregory." A palace herald recites a public poem, "O spiral great and olive blessed, where Gregory's cycles grant us rest. In parchment shade we lay our heads, and dream of donkeys, saints, and beds." You'd laugh, but the melody's catchy. The emperor finally takes notice. He's confused. "Why are the scribes smiling?" he asks his advisor. They're well rested, Your Majesty. Is this because of the spiral? Yes, Your Majesty. He scratches his chin. Make it imperial, then. But rename it. Something with the word elevated. The people love elevation. So a decree is issued. The elevated rhythm of duties and repose. It's exactly Gregory's system, but with more marble, and thus the weekend is now unofficially semi-official. At least until the next emperor. It begins with the twitch. Gregory's left eyelid, normally so steady, so unflinchingly bureaucratic, starts fluttering. You're the first to notice. He's mid-sentence, explaining how rest cycles reduce duplication in provincial toll reports, when his eyelid gives a little spasm. You don't say anything. By the next day, the twitch has spread to his left cheek, then his left hand, then his handwriting. The man whose calligraphy could once bring palace scribes to tears now leaves the occasional crooked theta. That's when he locks himself in the archive room for 3 days. At first you assume he's auditing something. Gregory loves a good audit. But then strange sounds emerge. Scrolls being rearranged. Parchment rustling like leaves in a storm. Once you think you hear crying, but it might also be papyrus snapping. Finally, on the 4th day, he emerges. He looks changed. Not unkempt exactly, but his robe is a bit wrinkled. There's a smudge of ash on his temple, his left sandal is on backwards, and in his hand is a new scroll. I've made adjustments, he whispers. You and Theodora exchange a glance. Adjustments to what? He unrolls the scroll, this one much simpler than usual, fewer footnotes, less terrifying math. In its centre, a symbol you've never seen before, a spiral coiling inward, ending in a tiny sleeping donkey. Below it, a phrase. 7 labours, then pause. For all must turn inward. You sit with that for a minute. This is a new rest model, you ask? He nods. I had a moment. What kind of moment? Gregory blinks. The crying kind. And now it all makes sense. He had a panic attack. The most organised mind in the Empire collapsed under the weight of his own system. He'd looped himself into oblivion, created a spiral so perfect it left no room for breath. You nod slowly. So, this is the antidote? He doesn't answer. He just hands out copies to the whole department. The new model is beautiful. 7 work days, though the 7th is labelled soft effort only. Then one complete pause. A true day of no writing, no accounting, no donkey tracking. A day to turn inward, whatever that means. Theodora takes one look at it and immediately names it. Gregory's Sabbath. You'd laugh, but your shoulders drop 6 degrees just reading the scroll and then you try it. The first pause day is disorienting. You sit on your mat at home staring at the wall. There's no scroll to copy, no ink to spill, no Gregory to correct your spacing. You feel lost for the first 2 hours, then you go for a walk. You watch a dog chase a leaf. You buy a fig. You smell jasmine. You nap in the sun. You return the next day clearer than you felt in months. Gregory's experiment spreads quickly. Everyone was just waiting for someone to officially tell them to rest, to breathe. By the second pause cycle, the scroll room is quieter, calmer, less snapping, fewer angry whispers about ink shortages and footnote spacing. Even Focus, who hasn't smiled since Emperor Leo lost an eyebrow to hot wax, hums a little tune. Gregory sits calmly at his desk, scribbling in a new ledger labelled Soul Metrics. You ask what it's for. He says it tracks emotional output trends. You choose not to question it. Meanwhile, outside the ministry, something strange happens. The merchants in the forum start copying the schedule. At first, it's just 1 or 2 stalls that close every 8th day, but then the fishmongers join, then the candle makers. Eventually, even the man who shouts about turnips from dawn till dusk is taking a full day off. The spiral has become a rhythm, but it's not all olives and naps. A complaint arrives from the Imperial Department of Fast Enforcement. Yes, that exists. Their job is to ensure no one feasts during a fast day, no matter how fainting or fish-starved. And apparently, Gregory's pause days occasionally overlap with minor fasts. The department is livid. They send a formal warning. Your intervals of repose appear to violate ecclesiastical abstention periods. Cease or face penance, Gregory frowns. But we don't eat more on pause days. They think rest is indulgent, you mutter. Gregory sends them a counter-scroll, a detailed breakdown of caloric consistency, and how repose days reduce gluttony by removing stress-eating incentives. They do not reply. A week later, a monk shows up instead. He's from the Monastery of Disciplined Breath, a sect known for excessive silence and impressive eyebrow flexibility. He carries a scroll. Gregory is to be evaluated for doctrinal deviance, he says. You've never seen Gregory look nervous before. He is now. The evaluation lasts a full day. Gregory is grilled about theology, rest, cycles, and whether turning inward is code for heresy. He answers calmly, methodically, cites ancient practices, quotes a few saints, invents two. At the end, the monk simply nods. This is acceptable. Then he leaves, probably to meditate in a wind tunnel or categorize his frowns. Crisis averted. But it's clear now, Gregory's pause day, his Sabbath, is no longer just a private oddity. It's becoming cultural, spiritual, even political. You return home after the third successful cycle. You light a small oil lamp, dip bread into garlic sauce and sigh. Not because you're tired, but because you're allowed to be, and you think, maybe this is how revolutions start, with a panic attack and a nap. You wake up late, not scandalously late, just deliciously late. The kind of late where the sunlight doesn't stab you, it hugs. The kind of late that tells you Gregory's spiral is working. It's a pause day. You stretch. No quill, no scrolls, no panic over inverted date columns. The empire can wait, except it doesn't. You step into the Ministry of Donkey Roots and find utter silence. Not calm, productive silence, the kind where people are hiding. Theodora pops out from behind the pigeon correspondence shelf and waves you over like a spy. They're doing inspections, she whispers, cross-checking attendance records. You frown. Why? It's a pause day. She nods. Exactly. Someone filed a complaint, said we're abusing state time for leisure purposes. You don't have to ask who. You can smell the vinegar breath of the strategos of statistical logistics from here. He's in the next room bellowing something about pagan nap cults. You duck behind a donkey root ledger. Across the room, Gregory calmly closes a scroll and stands. He's not hiding. He's humming. You realise with a shock that he wants to be caught. An inspector storms in, a lean man in a cloak that probably doubles as an emotional statement. He holds up a parchment. You? Gregory? Why weren't you at your desk for the first bell today? Gregory smiles. It's Spiral Pause 3? The inspector blinks. That's not a sanctioned observance. Not yet, Gregory replies. The silence hangs like stale incense. The inspector opens his mouth to argue, but instead sneezes. Dust. The pause day has meant fewer scrolls in motion, less ink, less fluttering. The room, for once, is still. You watch as he hesitates, then mutters, "We'll be back." Gregory sits. He hums again. A small tune. Something vaguely melodic, like a lullaby if lullabies were written in footnotes. The threat passes, and now something begins to shift. The pause day, initially just a quirk, then a movement, becomes policy. Not officially, of course. That would require 47 approvals, 3 sealings, and a goat-based sacrifice. But unofficially, the departments start adjusting. The Ministry of Linen now delivers reports every 7th day plus 1, citing papyrus drying intervals. The Imperial Grain Counter's office has declared inventory realignment days once per spiral. Even the tax clerks take longer lunches and call it digestive recalibration. The word weekend doesn't exist yet, but you feel it forming. Gregory begins adjusting the model, again. This time, he explains, we codify it. A recurring rest slot, not based on celestial alignments or martyrdom anniversaries, just logic. He's invented something remarkable. A calendar that doesn't rely on saints or moons or royal whims. Just cycles. 7 on, 1 off. Over and over. You stare at his latest chart. It's clean, elegant, comforting. It's also becoming fun. The scribes start naming the days. One of them coins Snooze Day. Another suggests Slackens Day. Someone even proposes Napner's Day, which sounds vaguely heretical but gets a laugh. A pigeon delivery clerk paints a little mural on the corridor wall, a spiral made of olives and donkeys, with tiny stick figures resting at intervals. You suspect it's based on Gregory's private sketches. Then, one day, something remarkable happens. You find yourself resting, without guilt. You spend your pause morning in the Forum, watching a bard try to juggle fish. You buy a pastry shaped like a scroll. You nap beneath a fig tree and wake up not panicked, not ashamed, but mildly hungry and spiritually neutral. It's beautiful. You're not the only one. The city breathes differently now. Markets bustle harder on Labour Days, then pause. Bell tolls seem less urgent. Even the street cats look fatter and more philosophical. And the Emperor? He hasn't noticed. He's currently embroiled in a personal war with a court astrologer over the legitimacy of Wednesday. That's fine. Let him fight. You have a nap to get back to. Of course, not all are pleased. A group of hyper-devout monks releases a scroll denouncing leisure as soul decay. They argue that every waking moment should be spent in worship or penance, or ideally both. You accidentally spill tea on their notice. Oops. Others are more creative. One noble suggests productive rest, where citizens simulate work in silence. Gregory responds by creating a scroll titled, How to Pretend to Work While Truly Resting, a guide to productive inaction. It's wildly popular. A senator is seen reading it during a debate. But here's the best part. Productivity goes up. Not just scribal output, everything. Deliveries arrive on time, clerks stop fainting at their desks, the pigeon post improves accuracy, even the soup in the palace kitchen stops tasting like someone whispered beans into water. You bring the data to Gregory. He doesn't gloat, he just nods. Rest recalibrates flow. The system isn't paused, it's primed. Theodora calls it magic. Focus says, it's like my bones are less mad at me. Even the strategos grumbles less. You think he's secretly observing the schedule, but it's not all figs and glory, because now that it's working, people want to own it. The Ministry of Schedule Sanctification, a real thing sadly, begins drafting a version of the cycle for imperial approval. You see the first draft. It's dreadful. They've renamed pause days sacred operational inactivity modules. You cry a little inside. Gregory reads it, sighs, and utters a sentence that will echo for generations. Leave it to bureaucrats to turn rest into paperwork. He's not wrong. But still, even the worst scroll in the Empire can't ruin the best part. You have another pause day tomorrow, and you plan to spend it horizontal, eating grapes and ignoring all mentions of operational inactivity modules. Because you're not in a cult, you're just tired. And now, finally, you're allowed to be. You don't wake up. Not at first, anyway. It's your third spiral pause day in a row that actually feels like a real break, and your brain has finally decided to stop sounding the morning alarm like a terrified rooster. The sun is halfway up the sky by the time your eyes open, and for the first time in ever, you don't bolt upright in a panic, wondering if you've missed the latest imperial decree about donkey hoof tax reforms. You roll over. The breeze carries the scent of baked onions and faint incense. In the distance, a bell tolls. 2 slow, lazy chimes. Spiral pause. Verified. Today, you do not report to the Ministry of Donkey Routes. Instead, you head to the market. It's surprisingly busy. Not frantic, like on tax days. Not empty, like during fasting season. No, this is something different. Balanced. Shoppers stroll rather than stampede. Vendors smile without baring their teeth. A child plays with a stick shaped like a stylus. 2 monks nap beside a honey stall. You notice something odd. People are starting to coordinate their rest. It's not just a clerical thing anymore. Monks, merchants, midwives, even messengers, all quietly syncing their rhythms to the Gregory spiral. One monk you recognise, Brother Leon from the Registry of Relic Authenticity, waves you over. Guess what I'm not doing today, he asks. Cataloguing suspicious femurs? He grins. Exactly. Spiral pause. But I thought the monastic orders had their own fasting calendars, he shrugs. We still do. But if St. Euphemia gets 2 feast days, surely we're allowed 1 rest day. You can't argue with monk logic. Even more curious, the city's small markets have begun closing once per cycle. Not fully, but just enough to notice. Stalls draped with embroidered cloth, signs that read, Repose in progress, back tomorrow. It's like the whole city is learning to breathe on beat. You wander past the grain counter's hall where, astonishingly, a dozen scribes sit outside playing some kind of pebble game. These are the same scribes who once fought over quill allocations like lions over a roast. You ask one of them why. He shrugs. The new calendar made us realise we were only pretending to be productive. Now we rest, then actually get work done. It's happening. The spiral isn't just a chart. It's a habit. A collective nod to the fact that maybe, just maybe, relentless effort wasn't the holy virtue everyone claimed. You make your way toward the outer district, where the city tapers into quiet. There, under a sun-bleached awning, you spot something unexpected. A midweek nap tent. Yes, that's what the sign says. Nap tent. All faiths welcome. Inside, hammocks, blankets, a corner for quiet contemplation, a barrel of free chamomile. You lie down cautiously expecting a trap. Instead, you drift off to the sound of a nearby lute player softly plucking a tune about fish. You wake an hour later, refreshed and suspicious. Back in the ministry the next day, the change is undeniable. Theodora no longer threatens to stab anyone with a stylus before her morning tea. Focus has begun greeting people with full sentences. The strategos of statistical logistics, may his spreadsheets forever remain alphabetized, even cracks a joke. Sort of. He calls Gregory a lazy genius. Gregory doesn't blink. Genius should be lazy. If it's doing too much, it's hiding something. This sparks what is now referred to in your department as the nap philosophy debate. Arguments include, sleep is the brain's symposium. Even God rested. He also didn't file tax forms. True productivity is the space between spreadsheets. At one point, a junior clerk proposes the idea of scheduled unconscious reflection, which is a fancy way of saying nap break. Gregory quietly adds it to the latest version of the spiral. And then, because history loves irony, the markets push back. Not all of them, mind you. Just one very loud guild, the imperial cloth vendors. They claim the new nap habits are reducing business, that fewer hours of market operation mean fewer tunics sold, that even donkeys are getting too relaxed. One vendor writes a scroll titled, "Against the Lazification of the Empire." It includes phrases like, "The empire rose on the legs of the wakeful," and "Let not this nap spread infect the minds of honest traders." It would be more persuasive if the author hadn't been caught napping behind a stack of linen the next day. Gregory is unbothered. Resistance is part of the spiral, he says. You're pretty sure he made that up on the spot, but it works, because the resistance fizzles out. Even the Angry Tunic Guild ends up closing once every 8 days after their weavers mysteriously stop showing up on Pause 5s. And here's the strangest thing. This decentralized nap culture starts blending with the religious one. Monks begin offering blessings over pause scrolls. One priest delivers a sermon entirely about divine rest, quoting scriptures no one's quite sure exist. He refers to the spiral as the Wheel of Holy Mercy. People applaud. You don't know whether Gregory is pleased or horrified. He now spends most of his days updating what he calls the Codex of Reposiology, a massive scroll-bound volume with cross-indexes, case studies and optional doodles of reclining saints. But the real test comes one humid morning when the Emperor, still itchy, still baffled by peasants, announces a citywide audit of all unauthorized time practices. This causes panic. Again. But then something new happens. The monks push back. The grain counters push back. Even the pigeon messengers unionize. They argue, in perfect harmony, that the spiral has increased efficiency, boosted morale, and reduced ink-related injuries by 38%. The Emperor listens. Mostly because his new astrologer whispers that the stars favour moderated idleness. And so, with a sigh, he issues what will be remembered as the decree of conditional repose. Let the cycles of labour and rest henceforth balance one another like olives and oil. But only if productivity remains pleasing, Gregory reads it, mutters mediocre poetry, and goes back to colour-coding his nap charts. But you smile. Because now, on pause days, even the palace cat naps longer, and if that's not progress, what is? It begins with tax reform. Doesn't it always? You're sitting at your desk enjoying a rare moment of stillness, gently outlining a new version of the Gregory spiral with decorative donkey flourishes, when a scroll crashes through the window. This is not a metaphor. It's a literal scroll, launched via pigeon courier, who very clearly overshot the delivery perch. Theodora screams. Focus mutters a prayer. Gregory doesn't look up. You unroll the scroll. It's a new decree from the Ministry of Imperial Revenue and Optimistic Harvest Forecasting. a name as bloated as its contents. The title: Notice of Tax Code Realignment and Punctual Reassessments based on Scroll Cycle Adjustments. Translation: They've noticed the pause days, and they want in. According to the new rules, anyone not visibly working during designated tax periods is now subject to repose penalties, a fine for every pause day that overlaps with a revenue cycle. Gregory calmly takes the scroll, reads it once, and says, "Ah, yes." The monetization of leisure. Predictable. You wish he were wrong. Over the next week, officials begin wandering the forums in crisp robes and suspicious eyes, watching for nap takers, scroll loungers, and anyone with a suspiciously empty ink pot. A baker is fined 2 silver coins for being emotionally unengaged during a grain weigh-in. A monk is cited for excessive contemplative posture. A goat inspector is accused of failing to visually verify ovine presence because he closed his eyes for 8 seconds. It's absurd, and yet effective. People panic. The spiral falters. Gregory holds up in the archives again. You think he's sulking. But on day 3, he emerges with a new scroll, a loophole. Tax havens, he says simply. You blink. What? Repose sanctuaries, areas where pause cycles are embedded in official accounting practices. The grain counters already do it. If we can replicate the structure, rest becomes part of the system, not a deviation from it. And just like that, it spreads. The Ministry of Goat Counts announces an inventory synchronization pause every 8th day. The Bureau of Minor Roads closes every 6th midday for pavement observations. Even the Firewatch teams in the Eastern District declare a rest interval for flame behaviour analysis. The language is creative, but the result is clear. Pause days become invisible again, hidden in forms, folded into flowcharts, baked into protocols no one understands but everyone follows. And here's the fun part. It doesn't stop with tax evasion. The spiral begins to inspire a strange new trend. Voluntary silence. At first, it's just one monastery. They start observing quiet rotations on repose days. No talking, no chanting, just reflection and gentle sweeping. But then scribes get in on it. A few claim it improves concentration. Others say it prevents arguments over punctuation. Gregory calls it the auditory compression of cognition. You call it weird, but it works. Soon, departments across the empire are initiating silent repose experiments. On pause days, people whisper, or don't speak at all. You communicate with Theodora via eyebrow raises and passive-aggressive scroll placement. One office even implements nap signals, raised fingers for do not disturb, stylus held sideways for dreaming of goat records, and one sandal on the desk for existential disengagement in progress. It becomes, dare you say it, fun. And somewhere in this bizarre evolution, a new creature emerges, the repose officer. You meet the first one during a surprise visit from the Imperial Bureau of Wellness Enforcement. Yes, it's real. A young woman in pristine robes appears, holding a scroll thicker than your thigh. She explains, every ministry must now employ a certified repose officer to ensure appropriate balance between output and personal restoration. Gregory smiles. I'll take the job. You stare at him. You already created the system. Exactly. I trust me, and so Gregory becomes both architect and enforcer. He begins strolling through departments, silently judging posture, ink stains, and spiritual gloom levels. He issues warnings like, your size have increased by 17%. Consider a leg stretch, or your quill grip indicates excessive tension. Pause and breathe. The worst part? People listen. In fact, they start requesting evaluations. Soon, Gregory is summoned to every office in Constantinople. He's followed by scribes, monks, merchants, even nobles, hoping to receive his blessing. Certified for repose. The scroll he uses for certifications has a tiny olive branch seal, pressed in honey wax. You receive yours on spiral pause 16. You hang it next to your bed. But bureaucracy has no upper limit. Within weeks, 3 new offices open. 1. The Bureau of Repose Oversight to oversee repose officers. 2. The Office of Certified Pause Day Compliance to monitor output during rest. 3. The Division of Scroll-Based Repose Accusations to report those who fake rest. Gregory sighs. We've looped back to chaos, but you disagree, because now everyone's in on the game. The pigeon couriers alternate routes to allow for rest nests. The fishmongers rotate stall days based on fish agitation levels. The royal bathhouse closes every 7th afternoon and calls it a steam Sabbath. Even the palace cat now sleeps on a velvet pillow marked Gregory's blessing. No one moves him, not even the emperor. And that somehow is the real miracle. Not the naps, not the spiral, but the fact that everyone is pretending to obey it while secretly enjoying it. And perhaps that's enough. You walk through the city one quiet afternoon, watching as shutters lower, hammocks sway, candles flicker, pigeons coo, a child doodles a spiral in the dust, and you smile. Because this all started with one man, one twitchy eye, one idea, and a desperate need for a break. Gregory is promoted, not because the emperor understands what he's done, he doesn't, but because the numbers look good. The imperial scribe metrics show fewer errors, cleaner ledgers, faster turnarounds. No one dares suggest that the cause might be naps and goat-shaped doodles. The emperor assumes Gregory is some kind of miracle worker, a logistical visionary, and calls for him to present his system at the palace. Gregory is unimpressed. "I have to dress up," he mutters. "I hate dress robes." They chafe. You accompany him anyway, partly for moral support, partly because your curiosity outweighs your sense of self-preservation. The palace is dazzling. Marble floors polished to the point of reflection, gold-leafed columns, fountains that seem to run on pure imperial smugness. A guard checks your scroll credentials twice before letting you enter the hall of overly important announcements. There sits the emperor, flanked by advisors who look like they've been carved from particularly judgmental stone. He waves a hand, summoning Gregory forward. "Tell me," the emperor says, "how you made the scribes stop being terrible." Gregory doesn't bow. He just says, "I let them rest." Silence. The kind that makes you wonder if you're about to be arrested for breathing wrong. The emperor squints. "Rest?" "Yes," in calculated intervals, a long pause. Then the emperor says, "Like a nap?" Gregory tilts his head. "If you like." You can see the advisors scribbling furiously, trying to turn nap into something that sounds imperial. Probably strategic subconscious deployment. The emperor leans back. "Does it work?" Gregory simply slides forward a scroll, a chart of productivity metrics compared with rest days. The numbers are undeniable. Even the emperor's eyes widen. "Huh? It's better." Gregory shrugs. "Humans aren't quills. They need pauses or they splinter." The room goes silent again. For a moment you're sure someone is going to accuse him of sorcery. Instead, the emperor claps. Once, loudly. "Promote him! Make him!" He glances at an advisor. "What do we call this?" The advisor says, "Perhaps Director of Harmonized Output." "Boring," the emperor mutters. "What about Archon of Repose?" Gregory grimaces. "I don't care what you call me. Just let me manage schedules." And so it happens. Gregory is promoted to Archon of Repose, a title that sounds faintly mystical and faintly ridiculous. Within hours, an official decree is issued. By order of His Majesty, Gregory the Calculating is henceforth recognised as Master of Rhythmic Efficiencies, Custodian of Pause, and Overseer of Strategic Rest. The scribes cheer when they hear. Theodora even bakes a cake. It's shaped like a donkey lying on its back, and it's delicious. But not everyone is thrilled. The strategos of statistical logistics is furious. He storms into the office the next morning, glaring at you like you personally handed Gregory a crown. He's undermining the chain of command. Rest is not a chain. "No," you reply, "but it's a circle." And circles work. He growls something about stitious spirals and leaves in a huff. Meanwhile, Gregory's influence grows. He now has official authority to enforce pause days. He creates a nap compliance ledger, which sounds terrifying but is really just a list of who is terrible at relaxing. You make the list once. Gregory orders you to spend the entire afternoon lying in the sun. It's not a bad punishment. Within weeks, productivity spikes again. Markets adjust their hours. Pigeon couriers fly smarter routes. Even the palace guards rotate shifts with scheduled tea breaks. The city hums like a well-oiled, slightly sleepy machine. But here's the kicker, the emperor takes credit. Naturally. He begins telling foreign envoys that he personally invented the elevated repose cycle, which he claims was inspired by divine dreams of olive branches. He even commissions a mosaic of himself holding a scroll labelled "I did this." Gregory doesn't argue. He doesn't care about credit, he cares about schedules. But you care. You remember the twitch, the panic attack, the spiral scribbled on an old scroll, and now here it is. Official, imperial, with a title and a cake. One evening you find Gregory in the quiet of the archive room adjusting a chart. You ask him, "Does it feel good? Being Archon of Repose?" He shrugs. Titles don't matter. What matters is the rhythm you lean against the shelf. But the Emperor will forget by next year, Gregory says, not even looking up. They all do. The spiral will outlast him. That's enough. And you think he's probably right. Because something's happening out there. You walk home through the streets, and you see children drawing spirals in chalk. Merchants closing early without fear. Monks singing songs about the blessed day of non-doing. It's not just a schedule anymore, it's a culture. A story people tell themselves, work is fine, but rest is holy. And maybe, just maybe, it is. You smell it before you hear about it. Bread, burned, sharp and acrid, curling through the streets like a warning bell made of crust. You look up from your scroll just as Theodora bursts into the ministry of donkey roots. Flour dusted across her tunic like a snowstorm gone wrong. "It's the bakers," she gasps. "They've revolted." Gregory doesn't even look up. "Again?" You blink. "Wait. What do you mean again?" Their dough schedule overlapped with Spiral Pause 18, she explains. They had a delivery to make, but half the market was closed. By the time the bread carts arrived, the Forum of Holy Trade was napping. A pause. Then Gregory says, Just, No panic. No worry. Just the faint sigh of a man already planning a new chart. But it's too late. By mid-morning, the city smells like burnt bread and righteous fury. A group of bakers marches through the outer district, waving sticks of old sourdough like torches. One shouts something about needing justice. Another yells, "Let no man rest while the crust cracks." You're pretty sure that was supposed to be metaphorical. They gather at the Forum and hurl loaves at the Hall of Restful Oversight. A clerk inside is struck in the head by a day-old rye. He survives but develops an irrational fear of carbs. The incident quickly becomes known as the Great Bread Ledger Disaster. Why? Because someone, probably Focus, was updating the bakery tax ledger during the protest. A rogue pretzel hit the ink pot. Ink spilled. Scrolls fused together in a gummy black mass. Entire records were lost. To this day, historians still argue whether the scroll was recoverable or whether the dough scroll was the first baked government document in history. The fallout is swift. The Emperor, still unaware that he didn't invent the spiral, issues a declaration. Henceforth, let all rest day activities be suspended during high-output culinary phases. In other words, no rest if bread is at stake. Gregory reads the decree, then folds it carefully, tucks it under a cup and resumes drawing a donkey-shaped graph. The ministry is divided. Some believe Gregory's spiral has gone too far. Others claim the bakers are just the yeast acting out. But all agree a compromise must be found, so you're sent, yes, you, as ambassador to the Bakers' Guild. You arrive at their headquarters in the Lower Loaf district, where the air smells like hope and cinnamon. The guildmaster, a woman named Agnes, meets you at the door with a wooden spoon and murder in her eyes. "We used to bake in peace," she says, "until this schedule started making people sleep through morning dough rise." You attempt diplomacy. "I understand. But rest has improved productivity across the city. Including yours," Agnes crosses her arms. "Our bread is productive. Our kneading hands are sacred. Try taking a pause day when your sourdough starter is bubbling." You look around. Loaves line the walls. Some are so crusty they could be used in palace defense. "I'm not asking you to stop baking," you say carefully. "I'm asking you to bake smarter. What if we added a flex day?" "A what?" "A flex day. Not a full pause, not full labour. A middle day, half need, half rest." A crust and cradle interval. Agnes narrows her eyes. "That sounds made up." "It is," you admit. "But everything is." She thinks for a moment, then shrugs. "We'll try it. But if the baguettes go limp, it's on your head." Gregory approves the plan. Crust and cradle. "I like it." You're not sure if he actually does, or if he's just amused by the phrase. The compromise works. The bakers adjust their cycles. The spiral absorbs the flex days. They're marked with a new symbol, a swirl atop a loaf. Gregory calls it spiral variant B, subrotation delta. The city calls it bread day. Bread quality improves, so do tempers. The baker revolt ends not with violence, but with a parade of gifted muffins. A new pastry appears, the rest roll, a flaky, honey-drenched, scroll-shaped treat that's served only on pause days. You eat 3. You regret nothing. But the emperor, forever behind, demands accountability. Someone, he says, must be punished for excessive drowsiness in the face of civic crisis. Yes, that's what he calls it. So a trial is held. The accused? Gregory. The charge. Intentional spread of unproductive ideals masquerading as administrative genius. The punishment? A full week of backdated scroll copying by candlelight. With no footnotes allowed, you attend the hearing. The chamber is packed. Pigeon messengers perch in the rafters. Monks fidget. Bakers chew aggressively. Gregory stands at the centre, serene as ever. The prosecutor, a grumpy man from the Department of Endless Forms, reads the charges. Did you, or did you not, encourage thousands of imperial subjects to stop working and lie down for no reason? Gregory replies, not for no reason. For rhythm, for balance, for better bread. A murmur of agreement ripples through the room. The judge, a weary woman who once worked in the office of statistical pigeon birth rates, sighs. We're all tired, she bangs the gavel. Case dismissed. Gregory is cleared. The spiral survives. And for the first time, pause is officially recognised as a state-stabilising mechanism. The bakers throw a feast. You eat 6 rolls this time. Still no regrets. The rest rolls? They stay. The scroll-shaped pastries become tradition. Served not just on pause days, but at weddings, monk promotions, even minor plagues. And the trial, it becomes legend. A lesson etched into the ledgers of time, that even in the most overworked, overwrought empire imaginable, sometimes the answer is sleep. You've just settled into what you're pretty sure is your 3rd rest day this spiral, though with Gregory's increasingly abstract labelling system, it might technically be a partial reflective interval or a cognitive loaf. Either way, you're enjoying a moment of peace on a sun-warmed bench when a clerk races past you, screaming about time. Time's broken, he yells. Time is melting. You blink. Is this metaphorical? Apparently not. You arrive at the Ministry of Timekeeping and officially ambiguous units of measurement. They got the longest name by winning a bet, and chaos reigns. Clerks are arguing about what day it is. Bells are tolling at random intervals. One man is sobbing into a sundial. Theodora arrives, looking deeply unimpressed. It's happening, she mutters. The reckoning. The reckoning, in this case, refers to the fact that Gregory's spiral, glorious, effective, adored by scribes and pigeons alike, was never actually synchronized with the official Byzantine timekeeping system. That system, as it turns out, is a volatile soup of Julian calendar rules, imperial feast insertions, local saint interpolations, and the occasional lunar anomaly. And now it's all colliding. You get the update from a wide-eyed monk with ink on his eyelid. Gregory's pause days have slowly shifted out of alignment with the imperial feast cycle by a full 3 days, which means, on paper, the empire is feasting while the city rests, and vice versa. A breach in the sacred ledger. The result? Absolute temporal nonsense. Here are a few things that have occurred in the past week. A tax was collected before the official date existed. A saint was venerated 2 days before he was born. A shipment of ceremonial olives arrived on a day that no longer had a name. A bakery accidentally invented a new holiday by combining Feast of St. Basil with Repose Spiral Variant C. They called it Breadmas. No one complained. The emperor is livid. Or he would be if he weren't currently observing the wrong fast day and refusing all food in protest. Of what? He doesn't remember. Gregory, when summoned to explain, simply says, "You cannot compress spirals into squares. Linear calendars are a mistake," to which the timekeepers respond, "We invented squares. They're literally on the sundials you're sent as a mediator." The Ministry of Timekeeping looks like a cathedral designed by someone obsessed with math and candles. Gears spin, sand trickles, scrolls hang from ceiling beams like paper bats. You step over a clerk sleeping on a pile of date conversions. Gregory stands at a podium, surrounded by angry mathematicians and one extremely frustrated astrologer. The debate is heated. Gregory argues for a flexible calendar system, one that breathes, adapts, bends with human rhythms. The timekeepers naturally argue for strict numerical alignment. At one point, a very sweaty man from the Office of Equinox Clarification yells, "The Emperor will not allow nap-based zodiac shifts," to which Gregory replies, "Then the Emperor should try a nap." It almost causes a duel. But then something unexpected happens. One of the time clerks, an elderly woman who's been staring at Gregory's spiral chart for the past hour, speaks up. "This actually makes sense," she says. "If you map the pause days onto lunar rotations, not strictly but loosely, it harmonizes with our irregular fast feast cycles. The slippage becomes predictive." She turns the chart sideways, then diagonally, then upside down. And somehow, that works. Gregory blinks. "I hadn't considered lunar drift as a rhythm buffer." The room goes silent. The debate transforms into an impromptu symposium. You watch as clerks, monks, and one enthusiastic goat counter begin scrawling new hybrid charts, part spiral, part celestial wheel, part fever dream. They work for days, and at the end they produce something strange and brilliant, the reconciled spiral calendar. It's not perfect, but it's close. A calendar that rotates like a wheel, not a line. 7 Labour Days, 1 rest day. Every 4th spiral aligned with major feasts, variants for baking, loopholes for monks, and crucially, it doesn't collapse during leap years. The Emperor reluctantly approves it after someone explains that it means fewer interruptions to his bathing schedule. The timekeepers publish an official endorsement. In it, they describe Gregory's system as unorthodox, structurally disobedient, but mathematically intriguing. Gregory takes it as the highest compliment he's ever received. And then, because nothing in Byzantium stays stable for long, another reform is proposed. Time tracking, not just days, but hours. You're invited to the pilot program. You arrive at the Ministry of Temporal Precision, where someone straps a small sundial to your wrist and hands you a scroll labelled, "Welcome to Imperial Chronosegmentation, a new way to fear minutes." It's exactly what it sounds like. The idea is to divide each day into 12 imperial segments, each assigned a purpose. Wake, scribble, ponder, walk, eat, scribble again, worry briefly, sip something, communicate, withdraw, pause, and sleep. You try it for a week, you hate it, you miss the spiral. Gregory hates it too, though he never says so directly. Instead, he publishes a counter-scroll called The Gentle Blur, in which he advocates for fuzzy time awareness, guiding your day by feeling rather than division. Historians still argue whether the gentle blur was satire or sincere. Gregory never clarified. But here's what does stick. People reject chronosegmentation. They return to the spiral. They say it makes them feel human, not measured, not sliced, not diced. You stand one morning in the forum and watch as a group of children draw the spiral in chalk, arguing over where the feast goes. A monk corrects them. A baker brings honey rolls. No one mentions the emperor. You close your eyes and breathe. The empire didn't fix time, but it did find a way to move through it. And maybe, just maybe, that's better. Word gets out. Not just across Constantinople, though of course it spreads through the city like melted wax down a warm candlestick, but far beyond, across seas, through letters, on pigeon wings, whispered by merchants, mumbled by pilgrims, drunk sung by sailors with poor recall but excellent harmony. Eventually the rumours slouch westward, all the way to the soft sighing edges of the Latin world. And one day, entirely too early in the morning, a message arrives at the Ministry of Donkey Routes with a seal so official, it's sweating sanctity. You open it. It's in Latin, of course, beautifully penned, heavy on the florid phrasing, the kind of prose that wears velvet gloves and insists on 3 metaphors per sentence. You bring it to Gregory, who reads it silently. He finishes and sighs. "The Pope wants clarification," he says. You blink. "Of the spiral?" "No," he says, deadpan. "Of the nap." Because as it turns out, the Western world has heard of Byzantium's holy pause pattern, or as the Roman clergy call it, il tempo gregoriano del riposo, the Gregorian time of rest. not to be confused with Pope Gregory's own calendar reforms, which are still decades away and probably slightly less nap-friendly. Apparently rumours have morphed the spiral into some kind of theological experiment, a new liturgical model, a possible Eastern innovation that could challenge the rigid feast-fast framework of the Roman Church. Even worse, someone sent a rest roll to the Vatican. Possibly as a joke, possibly not. And now the Pope is confused, intrigued, possibly offended. He demands to know, is this heresy? Is this laziness in spiritual disguise? Or is it, God forbid, a liturgical innovation? Gregory, of course, is delighted. He drafts a reply immediately. You watch over his shoulder as he writes, "To His Holiness, Bishop of Rome, etc., etc., please be assured that no new religious doctrine has been proposed. We merely sit down more often. The donkeys seem pleased." You blink. You're really going to send that? Gregory adds a postscript. Also, our bread is better now. Consider experimenting. The reply is sealed with wax shaped like a half-sleeping donkey. Completely inappropriate, entirely on brand. You send it anyway. Weeks pass. Then a reply arrives. This one is longer, heavily annotated, absolutely crawling with ecclesiastical suspicion. The tone is polite, but somewhere in the subtext you can feel the papal eyebrows arching. The highlights include a deep concern that rest days not aligned with Sunday are potentially disruptive to the soul's cadence, a footnote querying the spiritual validity of donut-shaped nap intervals, an outright plea to explain whether Gregory is a monk, a mystic, or merely a clerk gone rogue. Gregory drafts another reply. It begins, "I am a clerk gone rhythmically aligned." Theodora suggests he stop, but he doesn't. He compiles a full set of spiral charts, including optional feast alignment variants, secondary rest justifications, and diagrams of average goose productivity on non-work days. The entire packet is delivered westward by a courier with strict instructions. Do not open, read, or nap on this scroll. But the damage, or miracle, is already done. The spiral has taken on a life of its own. Roman scribes, hearing whispers of the day off that's not Sunday, begin testing secret intervals. A Benedictine monk allegedly skips Monday Vespers, claiming he is adjusting his soul to the spiral. A letter surfaces from Gaul describing a bishop's assistant who arranged his duties around something called the sacred slouch. Rome predictably panics. The Pope sends a clarifying document to all Western monasteries, declaring that rest is not inherently sinful, but must be conducted with liturgical awareness, and not in spirals, which only makes it worse. Because now everyone wants to know what the spiral is. Back in Constantinople, Gregory has become a borderline mythical figure. He receives letters daily, from a potter in Crete. "May I glaze spiral rest days into my bowls?" From a bishop in Nicaea. "Are double pause days heretical, or just optimistic?" From a child in Antioch. "How many naps make a saint?" Gregory reads every letter. He answers maybe half. Meanwhile, the imperial court scrambles to rebrand the spiral as a strictly administrative scheduling system, completely secular, definitely not spiritual, and absolutely not designed to threaten Western orthodoxy. They fail, because the people have already decided. The spiral is both practical and a little bit magical. A cult? Number. But a movement? Absolutely. You attend a spiral symposium hosted by the Registry of Scribe Wellness. It features a dramatic reading of The Gentle Blur, a reenactment of Gregory's trial using sock puppets, free rest rolls shaped like Gregorian sundials. It ends in a nap. Voluntary, highly successful. Later that week, Theodora tells you about a new scroll being passed around underground, The Quiet Rebellion. It's filled with quotes about rest, rhythm, and resistance. You recognise half of them as things Gregory muttered during late shift tea breaks. He doesn't know he's become a prophet. You don't tell him. Instead, you find him in the archives scribbling Spiral Variant J, which includes optional siesta slots and goat observation periods. He's humming. Peaceful. You ask him if he's worried. He says, "The moment the Pope writes a poem about naps, we'll know the spiral is won." And he's only half joking. The future remains uncertain. The east spirals, the west stiffens, scholars debate, cardinals fume, bread continues to rise, pigeons carry scrolls across lands where no emperor ever ruled. But the spiral, it keeps turning, one rest day at a time. Gregory retires, not dramatically. There's no ceremony, no velvet-robed send-off, no choir of drowsy monks humming in perfect harmony. Just a quiet note left on his desk one morning, weighted down with a pebble that might be symbolic or just heavy. It says, "The spiral sustains itself now. I've gone to sit by the sea." At first you think it's a joke. A brief pause, a reflective leave, another one of his mysterious repose pilgrimages. But no, he really means it. Gregory is gone. And suddenly, the ministry feels hollow. Theodora doesn't say much, but she makes her tea with less ceremony now. Focus goes back to muttering to his scrolls. The strategos of statistical logistics, ever opportunistic, tries to rename the spiral as the imperial cadence system and have it rebranded with his initials. It doesn't stick. Because Gregory didn't leave chaos behind, he left rhythm. The calendar still works. Pause days still roll through the city like a gentle tide. Markets adjust, bells chime, pigeons rest mid-flight. And people begin saying things like, "This feels like a Gregory day," or "That scroll has spiral energy," or "I need a repose delta and a cookie." And so naturally you're sent to find him. No official directive, just an unspoken agreement. Someone needs to see where he went. Make sure he's not sleeping in a barrel or building a new calendar out of seashells. You follow the rumours, through quiet monasteries, past vineyards run by suspiciously well-rested monks, down roads where innkeepers serve rest rolls, and claim the recipe just came to them in a dream. Eventually, in a coastal village that doesn't even have a proper name, the locals call it the place with the good figs, you find Gregory. He's seated beneath an olive tree, barefoot, sipping wine. There's a donkey napping beside him. Of course. He looks up. "Took you long enough." You sit beside him, not entirely sure what to say, so you don't. Instead, you listen. Waves lap against rocks. Wind rustles the olive leaves. Somewhere, a baker rings a bell that sounds suspiciously like a nap timer. Gregory breaks the silence. "They don't need me anymore. They still talk about you like you invented time," he chuckles. "Time was always there. I just gave it permission to breathe." You ask him if he misses it. He shakes his head. The spiral wasn't meant to be ruled. It was meant to settle, like dust, like memory, like sleep. You nod. Then, a question. Was it on purpose? The whole weekend? He shrugs. Depends on what you mean by purpose. I had a twitch, a scroll, and too much ink. The rest spiraled. You sit in comfortable silence again. A fisherman strolls past, whistling a spiral chant. Gregory raises his cup in greeting. "People keep saying it's holy now, you say." He smirks. "People say lots of things." One monk called it the Wheel of Mercy. Another said it was the Devil's Hammock. "I've heard both," you reply. You watch the sea for a while. There are no schedules here. No bells. Just rhythm. Gentle. Unforced. Alive. Eventually Gregory stands. He stretches, groans slightly. Age does that. And points to a stack of stones. There, tucked between them, is a scroll. You open it. It's simple. Just a spiral, hand-drawn, and a line. Rest is not the absence of work. It's the honouring of the human pattern. You want to ask if he came up with that, but you already know. It's his, and also not his. It belongs to the rhythm now. As you prepare to leave, he says, "Tell them not to preserve it." Let it flex, you pause. Flex. He smiles. Like a nap that turns into a dream. If they freeze the spiral, it stops being useful. Let it breathe. Let it change. Let it rest. You nod. Back in the city, they ask what Gregory said. What secrets he left behind. You shrug. He's sitting, drinking, listening to donkeys. They laugh, but they understand. A month later, someone carves a spiral into the side of the ministry's entrance. No plaque, no explanation, just a swirl in the stone. The weekend hasn't been formalised, not yet. But you notice that even the Imperial Guards have begun taking turns leaning against the wall, eyes half closed, heads tilted slightly toward the sun, and nobody stops them, because Gregory's gone. But the spiral remains. The city doesn't mark the change. There's no declaration, no trumpet blown rollout, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, the weekend becomes a thing. Not officially, not even by name, but people start knowing when it's coming. You wake on Spiral Pause 27 to the sound of children shouting, "Rest day, as they skip rope in the alley. A man selling lentils has a sign that reads, "Close tomorrow, go nap." The Ministry of Donkey Routes operates on reduced hours. Scrolls are only accepted if written with appropriate spiritual drowsiness. The strategos of statistical logistics now claims he invented the schedule, citing a vision he had involving clouds shaped like ledgers. No one believes him, but it doesn't matter anymore, because the idea has slipped past the gates. You overhear a tailor say she's closing on the Holy Eighth. A fisherman explains his catch is better after a spiral rest. One soldier whispers that his commander plans attacks only 6 days a week, out of respect for the cycle. You even see a nun dozing beneath a tree with a half-finished rosary in her hand and a rest roll in her lap. You begin to realise the spiral didn't just survive, it sank in. It became muscle memory. The court, of course, resists. They draft scrolls with titles like The Treatise on Overextended Napping and Against Rhythmic Idleness. But then someone notices the palace accountants are already observing spiral intervals in their calculations. Even the emperor's official bath days now align with the rest phases, though he insists it's purely coincidental. Meanwhile, something curious happens abroad. You receive a scroll from Ravenna, then another from Lyon, then a set from Cordoba, written in oddly poetic Latin. The spiral has crossed oceans and alphabets. In the West, it's been reshaped. There, it's called the gentle cycle, a rhythm observed by scholars, monks, and farmers alike. They've even started carving small spirals into the corners of their manuscripts, just like Gregory's first doodle. You smile. Gregory would have hated the name, but he'd have approved of the flexibility. Back home, people have begun referring to pause days by their own terms. Some call it Greg's gift. Others say nap day, eighth light, the donkey's mercy, or simply now day, as in, I'm not doing anything but now. You coin your own word, spun day. It catches on among the scribes. You find yourself napping more on spun days, not out of laziness, but from ritual. A pause, a reset, a little spiral inward. One day, a scroll arrives from a young clerk in the eastern provinces. She writes, I joined the ministry 6 months ago. Everyone talks about the spiral like it's always existed. No one remembers when it began. Some say it was written in the stars, but I heard you knew Gregory. Is it true he was just a bureaucrat? You smile. You send a reply. He was just a man with a twitch and a quill. But he noticed the world was tired, and he gave it permission to exhale. And you tuck a small spiral drawing into the corner of the parchment just like he used to do. On the street outside your office, you pass a bakery window. They're selling rest rolls in 5 flavours now. One is called the Gregory Swirl. It's terrible. You buy 2. By now, the spiral has gone far beyond scrolls. It's in dance rhythms. It's in prayer schedules. It's in when people decide to visit each other, when they say no, when they say not today, maybe spun day. You hear the spiral in pigeons cooing at midday, in markets that pulse and pause like breathing things, in the laughter that always seems to come easier on rest days. And finally, someone writes it down. Not as a law, not as a rule, but as a gentle note tucked into a broader calendar. In accordance with custom, the people may observe 1 day of rest following 6 of toil, as was long practised in the Constantinopolitan manner, and often attributed to one Gregory, who wrote in spirals and slept without shame. It's not doctrine, but it is remembered, and that, you think, is all the spiral ever needed. Not force, not credit, just space, to drift, to settle, to stay. So now, as the spiral drifts slowly to a close, you find yourself quieter. Not sleepy in the desperate, eye-twitching way that once ruled your parchment-stained life, but softly tired, like a well-folded sheet. The city around you breathes its spiral rhythm. The donkeys rest. The bells slow. Even the candlelight seems to flicker in time with your thoughts. Outside, pigeons roost without schedule. Markets close without panic, and from the hills beyond the harbour, the olive trees lean just slightly inward. Like they too have found their pause. There's no rush. There never was. And Gregory. Maybe he's still somewhere by the sea. Maybe he's scribbling new rhythms into sand, letting waves erase them gently. Or maybe he's just sitting, still barefoot, still sipping, still watching the world spin not in a line, but in a slow, sweet spiral. You roll over beneath your blanket. You breathe out. You feel the weight of your day fall away like sand from a scroll. Because sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is nothing at all. Sweet dreams.